three nodes, node 0, node 1 and node 2, and this cluster is entirely version 6.7.1. These nodes are all master eligible and they're data nodes, and node 1 is the master amongst these three. And I've got some data in this. It's not very much data. It's a 2-shard index. Each primary has 2 replicas spread across the 3 nodes. And I want to upgrade this cluster in a rolling fashion to version 7. So the goal here is to have all of the nodes as version 7, but without having taken the cluster offline at any point during the process. So I have a 3-node cluster and all of the nodes are master eligible, so I can just simply shut a node down and the cluster will remain available. But there's a risk there that recovery from that will take longer than needed, and there might be more shard movement after that than I needed. So there's some things I could do to prepare for the upgrade. So the first thing to do is to disable allocation of replicas. So by setting cluster.routing.allocation.enable to primaries, I will make it so that the cluster will allocate primaries but won't allocate any replicas during this process. And then the other thing to do, so I'm not indexing into this cluster right now, which is a good idea, and also I will do a synced flush, and you'll see that all 6 shards have accepted that synced flush, so they're all now kind of sealed and in sync, so they'll recover very quickly after this upgrade. So now I can go ahead and upgrade the first node, node 0, and I do this simply by shutting it down, so that node is now unavailable. But the cluster itself is still active. I can look at a different node. So node 1 is still the master, and there's still node 2 in the cluster, but node 0, as you see, is gone from the cluster. And some of the shards, I can't ask that, some of the shards will now be unassigned, but the primaries will still be started, so I could, in theory, index into this cluster if I wanted to. And now I can look at the config. So this is the version 7 config that I'm going to use, and the 6.7 config that I was using previously is exactly the same. So in particular, in version 7, I've still set minimum master nodes to 2. This setting is ignored in version 7, but it doesn't matter. You can set it there, and it will be. You'll get a warning in the deprecation log saying the setting is deprecated, but it doesn't matter. And I'm also using the old name for discovery.zen.ping.unicast.host. So in version 7, this has been renamed to discovery.seedhosts, but you can leave it set to the old value for the upgrade and worry about this the setting name later. So my cluster is down to 2 nodes, and the health should be reporting yellow because I have some unassigned shards here. So I can go ahead and start a version 7 node. And this will take a short while to come back up. And that looks like it started okay. So I can now look at the nodes in the cluster. And we can see now I have node 0, which is a version 7 node, active in the cluster. However, the cluster health will still be reporting as yellow because I have 2 unassigned shards. And that's because replicas were not allowed to be assigned here. So I can set cluster.routing.allocation.enable to null, which sets it back to the default value, and that removes the block on allocating replicas. And at this point, the cluster health has gone back to green because all of the shards have been assigned. So we have shards here split across multiple versions. So that's good. Now the next node I want to upgrade is node 1. And node 1 is currently the elected master, and in fact this is fine to do. I can shut this node down now. Sorry, I can't. First of all, I need to re-disable allocation like that. Set cluster.routing.allocation enable back to primaries again, so replicas will not be assigned here. Prevents some shard movement. And if I had done any indexing, I could also do another synced flush. Of course, I haven't done any indexing, so this is not necessary, but it's better safe than sorry. Now I can shut this node down, And that was the master node, so we need to perform another master election. And we will now see that node 2 has been elected as the master. And this is what I'd normally expect in a mixed version 6, version 7 cluster. I'd expect the version 6 node to remain as the elected master, because the version 7 nodes, they have a different way of electing masters, but they prefer to elect a version 6 master while there's one available, so that it remains backwardly compatible. So again, the cluster health doesn't work because that node is not up. I ask this node for cluster health, then the cluster health is again yellow. I have 2 unassigned shards, and we can see that the primaries are still there, so I could be indexing into these shards right now if I wanted to. So I can upgrade this node simply by starting a version 7 instance of it. So I'm using the same data path and the same config in both cases. So this is like an in-place upgrade. And here we have node 1 starting up, and it's joined the cluster. So if I look at what cat node says, so cat node has shown that it's joined the cluster. So I've now got 2 version 7 nodes in the cluster, and as well as my my version 6 master. And the cluster health will still be reporting yellow because I have 2 unassigned shards, because replica allocation is disabled. And I can set cluster.routing.allocation.enable back to null, meaning the default value, and that will allow those shards to be assigned. So now I have back to green health again. And now I can upgrade my final node. Again, I have to set this back to primaries to disable allocation. And I can do a sync flush for good measure. And now I'm in a position I can shut down this node just fine. And at this point, the 2 nodes, node 0 and node 1, have now discovered that there's no version 6 nodes in the cluster, so they can go ahead and form a version 7 cluster, electing one of them as master. And I need to ask one of these nodes what's going on. So now node 1 has been elected as the master in this new cluster, and so it's now a version 7 cluster. And that means that no version 6 nodes will be allowed to join this cluster anymore. So at this point I have to do an upgrade of this node to version 7. And at this point my cluster health will still be reporting yellow, even though this node has started. So you see it's joined the cluster. It's now version 7. Node 1 has remained the master, and but I have unassigned shards still. Even though the primaries are there, so the cluster health is yellow, so I could still be indexing here if I needed to be. And to complete the upgrade, I need to set cluster routing allocation enable back to null, back to the default value, which allows those shards to be assigned and allows the health to become green again. So that completes a rolling upgrade of an Elasticsearch cluster from version 6 through to version 7.